Settle into your pillow tonight. Maybe dim those lights just a little more. Close your eyes and imagine, what if the invisible became visible? What if the ancient stories weren't metaphors at all, but simply hidden from sight? Tonight, we explore a world where hell itself becomes as real as the ground beneath your feet. You wake up on an ordinary Tuesday morning, sunlight streaming through your bedroom window in those familiar golden bars that dance across your ceiling. The alarm clock shows 7:23 a.m., and somewhere in the distance, you can hear the usual symphony of morning life, car doors slamming, the hiss of coffee makers, children's voices carrying on the wind as they wait for school buses. Everything feels perfectly normal as you stretch beneath your covers, feeling that delicious moment between sleep and wakefulness, where the world still feels soft around the edges. But as you swing your legs over the side of the bed and your feet touch the cool, hardwood floor, something catches the corner of your eye. There, just beyond your bedroom window, floating like heat mirages above the suburban pavement, are wisps of crimson smoke. They move with an otherworldly grace, curling and dancing in patterns that seem almost choreographed, beautiful in their strangeness. The color is unlike anything you've seen before, not the bright red of stop signs or fire trucks, but something deeper, richer, like the color of garnets held up to candlelight, or the way blood looks when it catches the last rays of sunset. Your neighbors walk past these floating ribbons of red, completely oblivious to their presence. Mrs. Henderson from next door strolls by in her morning jogging outfit, earbuds in, checking her fitness app on her phone. The mailman whistles a tune as he approaches her front door, stepping directly through a particularly thick tendril of crimson that would have made you gasp, but they see nothing, feel nothing, continue their morning routines, as if the air itself hadn't just become visible, hadn't just revealed something that was apparently always there, waiting to be witnessed. You blink hard, rub your eyes, even splash cold water on your face at the bathroom sink. But when you return to the window, the red wisps are still there, still dancing their mysterious dance above the street where you've lived for 7 years without ever seeing anything like this before. Over the next few hours, as you move through your morning routine, with the strange sensation of seeing two worlds at once, the red wisps multiply. They seem to rise from certain places with an almost organic quality, like morning mist lifting from a lake, but instead of dissipating in the warming air, they gather and swirl and follow invisible currents that map themselves across your familiar neighborhood in ways you never could have imagined. You notice them rising most thickly from that corner near the bus stop where the homeless man sits each morning, his cardboard sign worn soft from countless hands and weather, his eyes holding stories you've always wondered about, but never asked. The smoke there is dense, almost burgundy in color, and it moves slowly, heavily, like honey poured from a jar. There's something profoundly sad about the way it pools around his worn sneakers, the way it clings to the chain-link fence behind him, where someone has woven plastic flowers through the metal links in a gesture of urban beauty that most people walk past without noticing. The crimson wisps also gather in the alley behind Romano's restaurant, where you sometimes hear raised voices late at night when you're taking out the trash, arguments between the kitchen staff, harsh words in multiple languages that carry the weight of long shifts, insufficient pay, dreams deferred. The smoke there moves differently, more agitated, forming small whirlwinds that remind you somehow of the way dust devils form in empty parking lots on hot summer afternoons. And on the steps of the old courthouse downtown, where verdicts are read and families either embrace in relief or collapse in grief, the red smoke forms intricate patterns that seem almost like writing in a language you've never learned but somehow understand. The wisps, there are lighter, more translucent, as if diluted by years of tears, both bitter and grateful. The smoke doesn't burn or sting your eyes. Instead, it feels warm against your skin when you cautiously extend your hand toward a passing tendril, like standing too close to a campfire on a summer evening when the air is already thick with heat and the promise of thunderstorms. There's a weight to it, not physical, but emotional, as if each crimson wisp carries with it the accumulated sadness of countless small betrayals, harsh words spoken in anger, moments when love was offered and turned away. You decide to follow one of the crimson trails as it winds through your city like an invisible river seeking the sea. The morning air is crisp, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and coffee from the cafe on 3rd Street, and as you walk, you begin to notice that the smoke follows patterns that make a strange kind of sense, flowing along paths that seem to map the emotional geography of your town in ways no conventional map could ever show. The trail leads you down familiar streets that suddenly feel foreign, past the elementary school, where children's laughter usually fills the playground, but where today the red wisps seem to thin and pale, as if joy itself acts as a natural deterrent to whatever sorrow these crimson streams represent. You watch a group of kindergarteners playing tag near the swings, their bright voices calling out in games that have no winners or losers, only the pure delight of movement and connection. And notice how the red smoke seems to bend around them like water flowing around stones in a creek bed. The smoke grows thicker as you approach the hospital complex on the east side of town, swirling in dense clouds around the emergency room entrance, where ambulances arrive with sirens that cut through the morning quiet like knives through silk. But it's not what you expected when you first thought about hell becoming visible. There's no screaming, no flames licking at the edges of buildings, no demons with pitchforks standing guard at gates of torment. Instead, there's just a deep sadness hanging in the air like morning fog that refuses to lift even as the sun climbs higher in the sky. The crimson smoke here moves with a gentle, almost tender quality, and if you listen carefully, really carefully, you can hear something that sounds like whispered regrets carried on the wind. I should have called more often. I wish I had said I love you that last time. If only I had been braver, kinder, more present. The voices aren't frightening. They're heartbreakingly human, filled with the particular ache that comes from recognizing opportunities for love that were missed, words of healing that were never spoken. You sit on a bench across from the hospital entrance, watching the ebb and flow of the crimson tides, and begin to understand that what you're witnessing isn't punishment in any traditional sense. It's more like a visible manifestation of all the weight we carry, all the ways we fall short of the love we're capable of giving, all the moments when we choose fear over connection, judgment over compassion, silence over the difficult, but necessary words that could heal. Days pass like pages, turning in a book you can't put down, and you discover that the red smoke follows patterns as predictable and mysterious as underground rivers seeking their destined ocean. You begin mapping these invisible currents in a small leather notebook you found in a drawer, sketching with colored pencils the way they bend like light through a prism around certain buildings, how they pool in stagnant eddies in the parking lots of payday loan stores and places where people go when hope has worn thin, how they thin out to mere wisps near the library where elderly volunteers read stories to children on Thursday afternoons, their voices gentle as rainfall on garden leaves. The smoke seems to have its own ecology, its own seasons and weather patterns that don't always align with the physical world around them. On days when the news carries stories of particular cruelty, wars that grind on without resolution, politicians who speak in sound bites designed to divide rather than unite, viral videos that shame rather than celebrate the human experience, the crimson streams grow heavier, more numerous, flowing with increased urgency toward some destination you haven't yet discovered, but feel certain exists beyond the borders of your small town. You notice that the smoke responds to human emotion in real time, like a barometric pressure system that measures not humidity and temperature, but the atmospheric conditions of the human heart. When you pass the coffee shop where Sarah, the single mother who works 2 jobs, finally gets a break and sits for 5 minutes with her eyes closed, just breathing, just being still, you watch the red wisps around her table fade slightly, as if her moment of peace creates a small pocket of relief in the invisible atmosphere of accumulated sorrow. Following these rivers of crimson leads you to places in your town you never knew existed. The back room of the community center where support groups meet on Wednesday evenings. People sitting in circles, sharing stories of addiction and recovery. Their voices raw with honesty, and their faces illuminated by the kind of courage it takes to look directly at your own brokenness and choose healing anyway. The smoke here is different, lighter somehow, shot through with threads of gold that you're beginning to suspect represent something like redemption, or at least the possibility of it. You discover that the crimson streams avoid certain locations entirely. The garden behind the Seventh-day Adventist Church, where an 80-year-old woman named Dorothy tends vegetables that she gives away to anyone who needs them, asking no questions, requiring no explanations, just offering sustenance to anyone who shows up hungry. The children's wing of the public library, where story time happens every morning at 10, and the small bakery run by the Vietnamese family who fled their homeland 30 years ago and still leave day-old bread in a basket by their back door with a sign that simply says, "Free, take what you need." On the 7th day of your new vision, when the autumn light has that particular quality that makes everything look like it's been painted with honey and gold, you encounter an elderly woman sitting on a bench in Riverside Park, her hands folded in her lap like birds at rest, watching the same crimson streams you've been following with the patient attention of someone who has learned that the most important things in life reveal themselves slowly in their own time to those who know how to wait and watch and listen. Her hair is silver white, braided and pinned at the nape of her neck in a style that suggests she has never much cared about fashion, but has always understood something deeper about dignity and grace. Her eyes, when they meet yours, hold the kind of knowing that comes from decades of witnessing the full spectrum of human experience without turning away, even when, especially when, what she's witnessing is difficult to bear. "You see them too," she says simply, her voice like autumn leaves rustling in the wind, carrying within it the sound of countless stories told and retold around kitchen tables, in hospital waiting rooms, during long car rides when there's nothing to do but talk and listen and be present with each other in whatever small way human connection makes possible. She doesn't ask if you see them, doesn't question what they are, or why they're visible to you now when they weren't last week. She simply acknowledges a shared reality with a matter-of-fact acceptance of someone who has long since stopped being surprised by the mysteries of existence. She tells you, as you sit together, watching the red smoke weave its patterns through the afternoon air, that there have always been those who could see the invisible weights the world carries, the accumulated sorrows, the unspoken regrets, the moments when love was possible, but fear chose differently. Some are born with this sight, she explains, while others develop it gradually, usually after experiencing their own dark nights of the soul, their own journeys through personal hells that teach them to recognize the landscape when they encounter it again. We're the witnesses, she whispers, and something in the way she says it makes you understand that this isn't a burden, but a calling, a form of sacred work that requires no certification, no formal training, only the willingness to see clearly and respond with whatever healing presence you can offer. She tells you about others she's met over the years, the night shift nurse who works extra hours, not for overtime pay, but because she's learned to see which patients are carrying the heaviest loads of emotional pain, the elementary school teacher who keeps granola bars in her desk drawer because she can see the crimson smoke that rises from children who come to school hungry for more than food, the bus driver who has memorized the faces of passengers who board with the thickest clouds of sorrow following them like personal weather systems. The smoke isn't punishment, she continues, her weathered hands gesturing toward the streams of crimson that flow past your bench like a river of visible grief. It's just truth, the weight of every unkind word, every moment of cruelty, every time we turned away from someone who needed us to stay. But here's what I've learned in 40 years of seeing what you're just beginning to see. It doesn't have to be permanent. Weeks turn into months, and something unexpected happens that changes everything about how you understand what you're witnessing. The red smoke, which you initially feared as some visible manifestation of damnation, begins to reveal itself as something far more complex and surprisingly beautiful. You notice how it moves through the autumn air like silk scarves in a gentle breeze, how it catches moonlight on clear nights and transforms it into something that shimmers with the deep richness of garnets, how its patterns sometimes form spirals and eddies that remind you of Van Gogh's paintings of starry nights, all movement and energy and mysterious purpose. You begin to see variations in color and texture that you missed in those first overwhelming days of new sight. Some of the crimson smoke is light and translucent, like watercolor paint diluted in clear water, rising from moments of minor cruelty, the impatient words spoken to a slow checkout clerk, the way people sometimes pretend not to see homeless individuals asking for help, the small daily choices to prioritize convenience over kindness. This lighter smoke dissipates quickly, blown away by genuine laughter, dissolved by sincere apologies, neutralized by conscious acts of consideration that follow soon after the initial moments of thoughtlessness. But other streams are thick and dark as burgundy wine, heavy as storm clouds, pregnant with rain that refuses to fall. These rise from deeper wounds, the words spoken in anger that can never be taken back, the betrayals that shatter trust so completely that rebuilding feels impossible, the moments when people use their power to diminish rather than lift up others. This darker smoke moves slowly, deliberately, following currents that seem to have their own gravity, their own inevitable pull towards some mysterious destination beyond the borders of what you can see. You realize that what you're witnessing isn't punishment in any traditional sense, but rather the visible weight of every unkind word, every moment of cruelty, every time love was offered and turned away. It's the accumulation of all the ways humans fall short of their highest possibilities, all the moments when fear wins over compassion, when self-protection trumps vulnerability, when the easier path is chosen over the right one. But understanding this doesn't fill you with despair. Instead, it fills you with something like awe at the sheer complexity of human experience, the way pain and beauty can exist simultaneously, the way even sorrow can be transformed into something that serves a larger purpose. On particularly clear nights, when the stars seem close enough to touch and the air carries the scent of wood smoke from fireplaces being lit for the first time, as autumn deepens into winter, you find yourself following the crimson streams just to watch the way they dance, the way they interact with moonlight and shadows, the way they seem to tell stories written in a language older than words, older than human civilization, older than everything except the fundamental forces that govern how energy moves through the universe, seeking always its proper place, its destined transformation. One night, when sleep eludes you, the way it sometimes does, when your mind is processing revelations too large to fit comfortably into the containers of ordinary consciousness, you find yourself drawn outside by an inexplicable restlessness. The air is crisp with the promise of winter, carrying the scent of dying leaves and the distant smoke from chimneys where families gather around dinner tables, sharing the small intimacies that make life bearable, past salt, gentle teasing, stories about the day's small victories and defeats. Unable to settle into the comfortable routines of evening, you decide to follow the thickest, most concentrated trail of crimson smoke you've yet encountered. It winds through your neighborhood like a river of visible sorrow, leading you past houses where you can see the blue glow of television screens through drawn curtains, past the corner where teenagers sometimes gather to share cigarettes and secrets, past the all-night laundromat where a single mother folds clothes at 2 a.m. because it's the only time her schedule allows for this necessary task. The trail grows stronger, more concentrated as you walk, until you realize with a shock of recognition that it's leading you back to your own home, up your own front steps, through your own front door that you somehow forgot to lock, up the stairs you climb every night, into the bathroom where you brush your teeth and wash your face and perform all the small rituals that bookend each day of your life. There, in the mirror above the sink, the same mirror where you've examined your reflection every morning for years, checking for signs of aging, practicing speeches you'll never give, sometimes just looking to confirm your own existence, you see the source of the thickest concentration of crimson smoke you've encountered yet. It rises from your own reflection, like heat from summer pavement, thin wisps emerging from sharp words you spoke in anger last month to a friend who was only trying to help, darker clouds flowing from times you chose silence when you should have spoken up for someone who couldn't speak for themselves, dense streams spiraling from moments when you turned away from opportunities to offer comfort because it seemed too complicated, too time-consuming, too emotionally risky. The smoke rises from every harsh judgment you've made without knowing the full story. Every time you've chosen cynicism over hope, every moment when you've protected yourself at the expense of someone else's dignity. It flows from the afternoon you pretended not to see your elderly neighbor struggling with her groceries because you were tired and just wanted to get home, from the morning you snapped at the barista who was clearly having a difficult day, from countless small betrayals of your own better nature that felt insignificant at the time but accumulated like dust in neglected corners, like sediment in a riverbed, like all the ways love gets postponed until someday, maybe when conditions are more convenient for kindness. Standing in your own bathroom at midnight, watching crimson smoke rise from your own reflection, you understand with crystalline clarity that hell isn't a place you go to after death as punishment for sins committed during life. Hell is the accumulation of all our small betrayals of love, all the moments when we choose fear over connection, all the times we turn away from the difficult but sacred work of being truly present with each other in this brief, mysterious experience we call human existence. Armed with this knowledge that sits in your chest like a coal that could burn or warm, depending on how you choose to tend it, you begin to change how you move through the world. The transformation doesn't happen all at once, like some dramatic movie moment where the hero suddenly becomes enlightened and everything becomes clear and simple. Instead, it happens the way seasons change, gradually, almost imperceptibly, until one day you look around and realize that everything is different, that you are different, that the very air you breathe feels lighter somehow. You start with small experiments in conscious kindness, testing a theory that has been growing in your mind like a plant reaching towards sunlight. When you encounter the homeless man at the bus stop corner, instead of hurrying past with your eyes averted and your earbuds providing a soundtrack for avoidance, you stop. You ask his name, which turns out to be Robert, and you learn that he used to work construction until a back injury made physical labor impossible, and medical bills consumed his savings like fire consuming dry wood. When you offer to buy him coffee and a sandwich, you watch in amazement as some of the thick burgundy smoke around his feet lightens to a pale rose color, then fades almost entirely, as if genuine human connection acts as a natural antidote to the visible weight of accumulated sorrow. You notice that acts of authentic kindness, helping an elderly stranger carry groceries up subway stairs, really listening when your coworker shares their concerns about their mother's health, forgiving yourself for past mistakes instead of carrying them around like stones in your pockets, actually dissolve small portions of the crimson smoke. It doesn't disappear dramatically with lightning and thunder, doesn't vanish in explosions of light that might signify divine intervention. Instead, it lightens gradually, the way ink dilutes in water, the way dawn slowly pushes back darkness, the way healing happens in real life, incrementally, requiring patience and faith and the willingness to trust in processes that can't be rushed or controlled. You discover that sincere apologies have their own particular effect on the red streams, causing them to thin and pale like watercolors being diluted with clean water. When you call your sister to apologize for sharp words you spoke during your last phone conversation, words that came from your own stress and fatigue, rather than any genuine anger toward her, you watch wispy tendrils of crimson smoke that have been following you for weeks simply evaporate like morning dew touched by sunlight. But perhaps most surprisingly, you learn that forgiving others, especially forgiving them, not because they've asked for forgiveness or demonstrated that they deserve it, but simply because carrying resentment feels like holding hot coals with the intention of throwing them at someone else while your own hands burn, causes some of the oldest, darkest streams of smoke to lighten and change color, transforming from deep burgundy to pale pink to something that looks almost like rose gold in certain light. The changes you're making feel simultaneously enormous and microscopic, like adjusting your life by degrees that might seem insignificant to outside observers, but feel revolutionary to you. You find yourself pausing before speaking when you feel anger rising, asking yourself whether your words will add to the crimson smoke or help dissolve it. You start carrying granola bars in your backpack for people who look hungry, not as some grand gesture of charity, but simply because you've learned to see hunger differently, to understand that it takes many forms and can often be addressed with small acts of attention and care. You start leaving small anonymous notes in places where the smoke gathers thickest, a practice that begins almost accidentally when you find yourself writing, "Someone cares about your story," on a piece of paper during a lunch break, and then, almost without conscious decision, leaving it tucked under the windshield wiper of a car in the hospital parking lot, where particularly dense clouds of crimson smoke seemed to indicate someone was carrying an unusually heavy emotional burden. The note disappears within an hour, and over the following days, you notice that the smoke in that area of the parking lot seems lighter, less concentrated, as if your small message somehow interrupted the cycle of isolation that feeds the visible streams of sorrow. Encouraged by this small success, you begin writing other messages. Tomorrow can be different. You are not alone. Your presence in the world matters. Someone believes in your ability to heal. You write them on index cards, on napkins, on pieces of torn notebook paper, always in handwriting that can't be traced back to you, always with messages that offer hope without requiring any response or commitment from whoever finds them. You tuck them into library books that haven't been checked out for months, leave them on park benches where people sit alone during lunch breaks, slip them into public restroom mirrors where people might catch their own reflection at moments when they need reminding of their inherent worth. You watch from coffee shop windows and grocery store parking lots, observing from a distance as people discover these small tokens of anonymous care. Sometimes they glance around as if looking for the source. Sometimes they smile with surprise. Sometimes they fold the notes carefully and put them in their wallets or pockets as if they were valuable currency in an economy that trades in hope rather than money. And sometimes, just sometimes, you see tiny wisps of red smoke fade away like morning mist, touched by sunlight, dissolving so subtly that if you weren't watching specifically for it, you might miss the transformation entirely. The practice becomes a form of meditation, a way of focusing your attention on the places where healing is most needed. You develop an eye for the subtle signs that indicate where your small interventions might be most effective. The woman who sits in her car for the long minutes before entering the grocery store, gathering courage for routine tasks that have become difficult since her husband's death. The teenager who checks their phone constantly while sitting alone at the bus stop, hoping for messages that might confirm their worth in a world that often seems indifferent to young hearts that haven't yet learned how to protect themselves from casual cruelty. The elderly man who feeds pigeons in the park every afternoon, talking to them with the same gentle attention he once gave to grandchildren who now live too far away for regular visits. Your messages become more specific, more attuned to what you imagine each person might need to hear. For the harried single mother, juggling work and childcare, you leave a note that says, "You're doing better than you think." For the college student who looks overwhelmed by textbooks and uncertainty about the future, you write, "Your education is an act of hope. The world needs what you're learning." For the maintenance worker who arrives early every morning to clean office buildings while the city still sleeps, you leave a message that says, "Your work creates spaces where others can thrive. Thank you for caring about details that make life more beautiful." Each note is a small prayer, a tiny intervention in the accumulated sadness that creates the crimson smoke, and slowly you begin to see that you're not alone in this work. Others are leaving their own anonymous messages, their own small gifts of hope, scattered through the city like seeds that might take root in the most unexpected places. A full year passes like a story being written in slow motion, each season bringing its own revelations about the nature of what you're witnessing. Winter teaches you that the crimson smoke appears more concentrated when daylight is scarce, and people huddle inside their individual warmths, missing opportunities for the casual connections that can dissolve loneliness like salt in water. You learn to carry thermos bottles of hot coffee to offer to anyone standing in the cold. Bus drivers on their breaks, crossing guards at school intersections, postal workers making their rounds through neighborhoods where house numbers are hard to read and driveways are slippery with ice. Spring reveals that the red smoke thins naturally when people spend more time outdoors, when community gardens wake up from winter dormancy, and neighbors who haven't spoken in months find themselves working side by side, sharing seeds and tools and stories about what they hope will grow in the coming months. You volunteer to help elderly community members prepare their garden plots, learning their names and their histories, discovering that Mrs. Chen grows vegetables she remembers from her childhood in Taiwan, that Mr. Johnson plants flowers specifically chosen to attract butterflies because his late wife loved watching them dance among the blooms. Summer brings an intensity to both the crimson smoke and its antidotes. The heat seems to concentrate human emotions the way it concentrates the scent of flowers, making both suffering and joy more visible, more immediate. You watch the smoke gather thick and heavy around overcrowded public transportation, around construction sites where workers labor in dangerous heat for insufficient pay, around emergency rooms where families wait for news that could change everything about their understanding of their own futures. But you also see it dissipate like morning mist around community swimming pools, where children of different backgrounds play together without the complicated prejudices they'll learn later, around evening concerts in park pavilions, where strangers sit on blankets sharing food and music that transforms individual solitude into something approaching communion. Autumn returns you to where this journey began, but now you see everything differently. The red smoke is still there, will always be there, as long as humans carry within themselves the capacity for both cruelty and kindness. But now you can see other colors too, other streams of visible energy that you were too overwhelmed to notice during those first weeks of learning to see the invisible made manifest. Golden threads shimmer in the air wherever people connect in moments of genuine understanding, between the barista and the customer who asks about her day and actually listens to the answer, between children and the elderly volunteers who read to them at the library, between strangers who help each other navigate crowded subway cars with patience and humor instead of irritation and aggression. These golden streams move differently than the crimson smoke, lighter and faster, seeking connection rather than flowing towards some distant destination, creating temporary bridges between people who might otherwise pass through each other's lives without recognition. Silver streams rise from places where people create beauty for its own sake. The community theater, where volunteers build sets for productions that might be seen by only a few dozen people. The art studio, where teenagers learn to express feelings they don't yet have words for. The small bakery, where the owner decorates wedding cakes with the same meticulous care, whether the reception will host 20 guests or 200. These silver streams seem to neutralize the crimson smoke wherever they intersect, creating small pockets of clarity in the emotional atmosphere of your city. And pale blue wisps, delicate as breath on cold air, rise from places where people find genuine peace. The meditation room at the hospital, where families gather strength for difficult conversations. The small chapel, where people of various faiths light candles for hopes they can't quite articulate. The bench by the river, where joggers stop to watch sunrise, paint the water in colors that remind them why being alive, even with all its complications, feels like a gift worth receiving. In your dreams now, which have become more vivid and meaningful since you began seeing the invisible currents of human emotion made manifest, you walk through gardens that exist nowhere in the waking world, but feel more real than any landscape you've encountered in ordinary consciousness. These dream gardens are where the crimson smoke has been transformed into something else entirely, places where the accumulated sorrows and regrets of human experience have been composted into rich soil from which new forms of beauty can grow. The gardens are vast and varied, containing ecosystems you've never seen but somehow recognize as absolutely necessary, perfectly designed for purposes that become clear only as you explore their winding paths with the patience of someone who finally understands that the most important journeys can't be rushed. In one section, deep red roses grow from places where the thickest concentrations of pain once pooled, their petals soft as forgiveness, their fragrance carrying notes of all the tears that had to be cried before healing could begin. When you touch these roses, you feel the presence of everyone who contributed to their creation, not just those who caused pain, but those who chose to transform it rather than pass it on, those who learned to alchemize suffering into wisdom, bitterness into compassion. Another area of the dream garden contains trees whose roots extend deep into earth, made fertile by every harsh word that was eventually followed by sincere apology, every betrayal that was eventually met with forgiveness, every moment when someone chose to break cycles of hurt rather than perpetuate them. These trees bear fruit that tastes like hope, like the particular sweetness that comes from understanding that redemption is always possible, that no mistake is so permanent that it can't become the foundation for something better, something more aligned with the love that lies at the center of human experience, even when it's buried under layers of fear and self-protection. There are meadows where flowers grow in patterns that mirror the golden and silver streams you've learned to see in waking life, places where the energy of genuine connection and creative expression has taken root and multiplied, creating landscapes of beauty that exist for their own sake, requiring no justification beyond their existence, no purpose beyond the joy they create simply by being exactly what they are. Streams of clear water run through these dream gardens, And when you cup this water in your hands and taste it, you understand that it's made from every tear of relief that was ever cried, every moment when someone realized they were not as alone as they feared, every instant when love proved itself stronger than whatever forces seemed determined to diminish or destroy it. The water is impossibly pure, impossibly refreshing, and when you drink it, you feel yourself being restored in ways you didn't even know you needed restoration. In the center of the garden stands a structure that might be called a temple, or might simply be called home. Its architecture, incorporating elements from every culture's vision of sacred space, arched doorways that welcome all who approach, windows that let in light without barriers, rooms designed for gathering, and rooms designed for solitude, all connected by corridors that seem to adjust their proportions based on what each visitor needs, expanding for those who need space to move and think, becoming more intimate for those who need to feel held and protected. Inside this central structure, you find a room filled with books written in languages you've never learned but can somehow read, stories that chronicle every act of kindness that was ever performed in secret, every moment when someone chose love over fear, even when fear seemed more practical, every decision to build rather than tear down, to heal rather than harm, to plant seeds of hope in soil that might seem too damaged to support new growth. You meet regularly now with others who see what you see, gathering in small groups that form organically, drawn together by the shared recognition that comes when people who have learned to perceive invisible realities encounter each other in coffee shops, waiting rooms, public parks, where they've all come to observe the same phenomena that most of the world moves through without noticing. These gatherings are informal, often wordless, sometimes consisting of nothing more than sitting together on park benches, watching the interplay of crimson smoke and golden threads, sharing the quiet satisfaction that comes from witnessing transformation, from knowing that healing is always occurring somewhere, that hope is always taking root in the most unlikely places. There's Marcus, the bus driver, who has learned to take longer routes through neighborhoods where the smoke is thickest, offering free rides with genuine smiles to anyone who looks like they're carrying more than they can handle alone. He keeps a thermos of coffee and a box of granola bars under his driver's seat, and when passengers board looking particularly weighed down by invisible burdens, he finds ways to offer these small comforts without making anyone feel like an object of charity. He's discovered that people often share their stories during these slightly longer rides, talking to him in the rearview mirror about struggles they've never spoken aloud. And he's learned that sometimes the most profound healing happens when someone simply listens without trying to fix anything, without offering advice, just creating space for truth to be spoken. There's Elena, the elementary school teacher, who keeps granola bars in her desk drawer, but also keeps art supplies, band-aids for scraped hearts, as well as scraped knees, and most importantly, time to notice which children arrive at school, carrying the heaviest concentrations of crimson smoke, time to find ways to connect with kids who might otherwise disappear into the background of busy classrooms, time to call parents not just when there are problems, but when their children do something that deserves celebration. She's learned that schools can be sanctuaries where smoke begins to clear, places where children learn that their stories matter, that their feelings are valid, that they have within themselves the capacity to contribute beauty to the world. There's David, the night shift nurse at the hospital who works extra hours, not for overtime pay, but because he's developed the ability to see which patients are carrying the heaviest loads of emotional pain alongside their physical ailments. He's learned to recognize the particular quality of crimson smoke that rises from people who are facing mortality for the first time, from families keeping vigil beside beds where loved ones hover between worlds, from individuals who are healing from traumas that can't be addressed with medication or surgery. David has discovered that presence itself is a form of medicine, that sitting quietly with someone during their darkest hours can cause even the thickest smoke to lighten, that sometimes the most sophisticated healing technology is simply the willingness to stay when staying is difficult. Your group doesn't call itself anything formal, doesn't have meetings with agendas or officers or mission statements. You simply find each other and recognize each other and share the understanding that comes from seeing the invisible made visible, from understanding that the work of healing happens in countless small moments, in choices made by ordinary people who have learned to pay attention to the emotional weather around them and respond with whatever warmth they can offer. Together, you're not trying to eliminate hell. You've come to understand that would be neither possible nor necessary. The capacity for causing harm, for falling short of love, for choosing fear over connection, seems to be woven into the very fabric of human experience, part of what makes growth and redemption and genuine transformation possible. Instead, you're learning to alchemize hell, to transform the energy of accumulated sorrow into fuel for greater compassion, to use your ability to see invisible pain as guidance for where healing presence is most needed. You share stories of small victories, moments when particularly dense clouds of smoke suddenly thinned after someone received unexpected kindness, times when golden threads appeared where none had existed before, instances when the simple act of being seen and acknowledged seemed to shift something fundamental in another person's relationship to their own suffering. You also share the challenges, the exhaustion that can come from constantly witnessing pain, the temptation to become overwhelmed by the sheer volume of healing that seems needed, the difficulty of maintaining hope when the crimson smoke sometimes seems endless, but mostly you share the quiet satisfaction that comes from knowing you're part of something larger than individual action, part of a network of witnesses and healers who are working to shift the emotional climate of your community, one interaction at a time, one moment of genuine presence at a time, one act of anonymous kindness at a time. One evening, as autumn settles over your city like a comfortable blanket, and the air carries the scent of wood smoke and dying leaves, you realize something profound that stops you in the middle of your evening walk and makes you sit down on the nearest bench to fully absorb the implications of what you're understanding. The ability to see hell wasn't a burden dropped on you by some cosmic accident or divine punishment. It was a gift, carefully calibrated to your particular capacity for witness and response, offered at exactly the moment when you were ready to receive it without being crushed by its weight, because only by witnessing pain can you truly understand the power of healing. Only by seeing the visible weight of accumulated cruelty can you comprehend how revolutionary simple kindness actually is, how each moment of genuine care creates ripples that extend far beyond what you can see or imagine. Only by understanding how easily humans can create hell for themselves and each other, can you appreciate the profound courage it takes to choose love repeatedly, especially when love requires vulnerability, when it demands that you show up for others, even when your own heart feels fragile or tired. The crimson smoke still rises from all the same places it did when you first began seeing it a year ago, from corners where people gather in desperation, from buildings where power is used to diminish rather than elevate human dignity, from situations where fear has convinced people that cruelty is the only practical response to their own pain. But now it's met by your conscious acts of love, and by the conscious acts of love performed by countless others who may not see the smoke, but who respond to its effects, who understand intuitively that healing is always needed and always possible. You've become part of what feels like a gentle revolution, a quiet uprising of people who have decided that the world doesn't have to be as harsh as it sometimes seems, that small acts of attention and care can create pocket sanctuaries of hope even in the most unlikely circumstances. This revolution requires no manifestos, no political organization, no charismatic leaders promising impossible solutions to complex problems. It requires only the willingness to see clearly and respond with whatever healing presence you can authentically offer. You think about all the small changes you've witnessed over the past year, the way the homeless encampment behind the grocery store has become more organized and supportive since volunteers started bringing not just food, but board games and books, creating space for community rather than just survival. The way the atmosphere in the hospital waiting rooms has shifted since people started leaving encouraging notes in the magazines and bathroom mirrors. The way certain street corners feel lighter, less weighted with despair, since anonymous gift givers began leaving bus tokens and coffee shop gift cards in places where people wait for transportation to jobs that don't pay enough to cover basic expenses. The changes are subtle, might be invisible to casual observers, but you can see them in the shifting patterns of smoke and light, in the way golden threads appear more frequently in places where they were once rare, in the gradual transformation of emotional weather systems that affect entire neighborhoods. You're witnessing the slow miracle of collective healing, the way communities can shift from survival mode to something approaching thriving when enough individuals decide to prioritize care over convenience, connection over self-protection. You understand now that hell was never meant to be permanent, was never designed as eternal punishment for moral failures. Hell is simply what happens when humans forget their fundamental interconnectedness, when they become so focused on individual survival that they lose sight of the ways their well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of everyone around them. And healing hell doesn't require dramatic interventions or superhuman sacrifice. It requires only the consistent choice to remember that love is always possible, always practical, always the most intelligent response to whatever difficulties life presents. Tonight, as you close your eyes and feel sleep approaching like a gentle tide that will carry you back to those dream gardens where transformation is always occurring, you remember that first Tuesday morning when you thought you were seeing something terrible, something that would burden you with knowledge too heavy to carry. Now you know you were witnessing something sacred, the visible reminder that every choice matters, every word carries weight, every moment offers the possibility of transformation that extends far beyond individual experience into the collective fabric of human existence. The crimson smoke continues to rise from places where people have forgotten their capacity for kindness, where fear has convinced them that protecting themselves requires diminishing others, where the accumulated weight of small cruelties has created atmospheric conditions that make hope feel impossible. But now, you see this smoke differently, not as evidence of permanent moral failure, but as a form of divine accountability, a visible reminder that actions have consequences that extend far beyond immediate circumstances, that what we do to others, we ultimately do to ourselves and to the interconnected web of relationships that sustains all life. You've learned that hell is not a place you go after death as punishment for sins committed during life, but a condition that exists wherever love is absent, wherever people have become so disconnected from their own essential goodness that they can only relate to others through power, control, manipulation, or indifference. And you've learned that heaven is not a distant reward for good behavior, but a condition that exists wherever love is present, wherever people remember their fundamental interconnectedness and choose to act from that recognition rather than from fear. The most profound realization is that hell and heaven are not fixed destinations, but fluid conditions that can shift moment by moment based on the choices made by ordinary people who may not even realize the cosmic significance of their daily decisions to be kind or cruel, present or distracted, helpful or indifferent. Every interaction is an opportunity to move the world slightly toward heaven or slightly toward hell, and witnessing this process has taught you that there is no such thing as an insignificant moment, no such thing as a person whose choices don't matter. As sleep carries you deeper into rest, you feel gratitude for the gift of sight that has transformed your understanding of what it means to be human, what it means to live in community with others who are struggling with their own combinations of pain and hope, fear and love. You feel grateful for the opportunity to participate in the ongoing creation of a world where love is more common than fear, where healing is more common than harm, where people remember more often than they forget that their well-being is intimately connected to the well-being of everyone around them. Perhaps the real hell was never about punishment for moral failures. Perhaps it was always about the invitation to become more kind, more present, more willing to see the pain that surrounds us, and respond with whatever healing presence we can authentically offer. Perhaps the visible smoke was never meant to inspire fear, but to inspire love, to remind us that we have the power to transform suffering into wisdom, isolation into connection, despair into hope that takes root and grows in the most unlikely places. And perhaps the most beautiful truth of all is that this transformation is always available, always possible, always beginning again with each moment of conscious choice to participate in the healing of the world rather than its wounding, to add light to places where darkness has gathered, to remember that love is not just an emotion, but a practice, a discipline, form of sacred work that ordinary people can perform in extraordinary ways, simply by paying attention and responding with whatever kindness their hearts can hold. And if you're ready to dream with me again tomorrow night, to explore another mystery that hides just beyond the edge of what we think we know, I'll be here, waiting with stories that might help you sleep deeper, dream richer, and wake up tomorrow with eyes a little more open to the magic that's always occurring all around us.